Okay, hello, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Carlo Jose San Juan, and as mentioned earlier, I'm a medical physician, and I'm one of the rare people in the world who are both a physician and a professional cartoonist. So I was asked by our gracious hosts, SM BF Parañaque and Komikon Inc, to talk about what it is to be both a physician, a doctor, and a cartoonist. Now, it's a very rare thing, apparently. I didn't know it was that rare. I thought there were many of me. And there are people like me in the world, but apparently it still is quite rare. So hence, I'm going to be talking about being a doctor and a cartoonist, having two professions. So first off, I'll be talking about myself. Now, who am I? So again, my name is Dr. Carlo Jose San Juan. I am a medical physician. I am a diplomat of the Philippine Board of Nuclear Medicine. I took biology in pre-med, so I'm essentially a biologist. So to get my my MD degree and my diplomat degree in nuclear medicine, it took me roughly 15 years to become a nuclear medicine specialist. But I did some things on the side. I was also a voice actor. I don't do that as often as I did before, so I did a few radio advertisements. I was also an event announcer sometimes. And most recently, I was dubbing Filipino telenovelas into English for broadcast abroad. So I am the English voice of some of your favorite artistas. Usually a teenage boy. That's what I was typecast as. But why I'm here today in front of you is because I'm a comic artist. And I started out very early. As far back as I could remember, I would doodle these comics in old notebooks just to please myself. But when I was in high school, I was the art editor of our student newspaper, and I joined the art staff of my university newspaper, where I started my current comic strip. I was also the art editor of my med school newspaper, and currently my comics are published in CallousComics.com and tapas.io, and also in the Manila Bulletin. And also, as mentioned earlier, I am a member of the Samahang Cartoonista ng Pilipinas. So, what is this comic strip that I do? It's called Callous. It's a webcomic at CallousComics.com. It was also a comic strip published by the Manila Bulletin. And it's a multimedia entertainment platform. I've actually produced a couple of animated cartoons for dissemination of information regarding healthcare. So Callous is about, the main character is Dr. Rian Nika. So my main character is a doctor. She is a struggling new family practitioner, or family medicine, ang kanyang specialty. She is a very smart doctor, a brilliant doctor. But she spent her entire youth, studying. Nag-aaral lang siya. Never siya discover yung kanyang sarili niya. And she knows very little about life and the world beyond medicine. So very, very smart doctor siya, pero beyond medicine, pretty much wala siyang alam. Now, napansin niyo sa image, may kasama siyang, duck. So yan po, si Cal Duck. Siya yung kanyang guardian duck. Inassign sa kanya para maging guide to becoming the best person she can be. Protector din siya, tsaka hindi siya invisible, nakikita ng lahat. Unfortunately, first time niya maging guardian duck. And so, ibig sabihin, meron siya mga kasamang on-the-job mentor. So, yung ibang ducks dyan sa picture. So the genre, it's a gag comic strip. It's a newspaper comic strip, so it's accessible to all ages. And pretty much you don't really have an overarching storyline. It's one gag at a time, one gag per day. And as I mentioned earlier, the main character is a doctor, trying to find her path in this world. So essentially, my comic is all about me. But before Callous began, I had the duck character already. I first started drawing. I like ducks kasi yung favorite animal ko. If you think of any cartoon na may maraming animals, malamang yung duck yung favorite character ko. So back in 1989, I started drawing little comics about Dan the Daring Duck. So parang daredevil siya na duck doing various jobs. Parang siya yung bibe dun sa shooting gallery. Yun yung mga trabaho niya. Tapos when I was in high school, ginawa ko siyang high school student. So yung mga experiences ko sa high school, yan yung nagiging adventures ni Dan the Duck. Tapos in 1995, when I started, hindi pa rin starting Callous, pero I renamed him to Cal Duck. So in my high school newspaper, ako yung art editor. I also drew comics and accompanying artwork for articles. And of course, comic strips, so high school life humor, and I also did some spoofs of some mga TV ads. No? And after that, and I would see the reaction of my classmates sa mga ginagawa kong comics, and I felt, baka I can pursue a career in comics. So I asked, my teachers, my friends, what do you think? Should I go for a career in comics? And their answer to me was, no, you shouldn't go into comics. Siyempre, heartbreak ako dyan. But no, that was my dream. I wanted to become a cartoonist. And the reasons they would tell me are parang my art style was too Western. Back then kasi super hilig ako sa mga Garfield, mga Peanuts, hindi pa Calvin Halls, but yung mga yun, yung nakikita natin sa dyaryo, mga comic strips. That was my first love when it comes to comics. Yung humor ko, tsaka yung writing ko was also too Western. Walang audience dito sa Pilipinas para sa humor ko. Tsaka hindi daw siya pangmasa. Back then, kasi super sikat yung Pugad Baboy, mga ganyan. Mga comics that were geared to everybody, pretty much. No? Whereas my humor was had a specific niche. So I thought, okay, what if kung hindi ito, papatok sa Pilipinas, should I think about going abroad to aspire to become a newspaper cartoonist abroad? There was still people, my teachers, my friends, sinasabi pa rin sa akin, no, yung competition is too fierce. Isipin mo kung ilang aspiring cartoonists sa buong mundo na gusto magtrabaho sa for example, in the United States. So, basically sinasabi sa akin, there's no chance. So, hindi ka magiging cartoonist sa Pilipinas or anywhere. So, of course, that being my dream, medyo na heartbreak na ako niyan. So, I started thinking, what else can I do? One of the things I like about being a cartoonist is being able to touch other people, make their lives better. From afar, drawing ka lang ng isang joke, have it published, tapos babasahin ng isang tao na from very far away, tapos parang kiniliti mo siya, tatawa siya, or basta it makes them feel better. So I like that. And I thought, what's a career that could help me help other people feel better? So I decided to go into medicine. So I entered pre-med. But I still had that itch na gusto ko pa rin maging cartoonist. So sumali ako sa university newspaper namin, sa De La Salle University. Tapos in August 7, 1996, the first Callous Comics strip was published. So back in college, in Callous was a college situation comedy. And at the time, mga mid and late 90s, yung uso sa comics, yung mga edgy na art. You could see it in cartoons and other, what do you call this? Other comics. Everything was very dark and very edgy. So I had to try to change yung art style ko to reflect that. The panels you see on screen now are some of the very first panels I drew for Callous. And my main character, si Rianne, she's actually the girl that's being shown to you right now. And she looked very different back then, but that was her. Now, where was Cal Duck, you might ask? Calduck was sort of the mascot of the series. He would appear in the title panel and going through various misadventures. And then later on, nag-evolve yung series, nag-extend pala to one-panel comics like you see in The Far Side and so on. And I made Calduck star in those. But it would be time to move on eventually, tapos pumasok na ako sa med school. Tapos sa med school, lo and behold, meron din student newspaper. Then I offered, what if I draw comics for the student newspaper sa med school? So I started Callous Quacks in 2000. Tapos yung dating background character ko, si Rian, became the main character. Tapos si Calduck nag-enter into the main continuity as a guardian duck. Now the reason I did that was, pinag-isipan ko bakit ako nag-medicine? Bakit ako nagpapahirap ng ganito para maging doktor? So I was asking myself these questions, and making these comics helped me get past those doubts that I really wanted to become a doctor talaga. Because you're not going to make it as a doctor if you don't really want to do it. So Callous Quacks was a medical student situation comedy naman. So a lot of internal jokes with the med students. Unfortunately, I didn't save any of the issues. I only have this one digital copy of one strip, and that's all that remains, at least in my records. But as you know, medical school is very difficult. Mahirap siya. Mahirap maging doktor. And there came a certain point in my medical training I couldn't make any more comics. It was just impossible. So from 2004 to 2008, I put Callous on hiatus, and I wasn't sure if I was ever going to start it again. That was because I was going through my 4th year in med school, which is the toughest year. It was the worst year of my life. And so I can also say it was one of my best years, but definitely it was one of the worst years of my life. It was very humbling. I was brought down very fast to earth. Realized that my place in this world, in a sense. Then I underwent Philippine postgraduate internship in Philippine General Hospital, which is a very hard hospital to train in. And then I took my board exam, became a licensed physician, I got married, I became a husband and a father, I became a general practitioner. And during that whole time, I only made 2 comic strips, one in 2006 and one in 2007, which I posted in multiply.com, which no longer exists. But then I still had that dream, maybe I could be both. I could be a doctor and a cartoonist. So I wanted to try entering Philippine newspaper comics pages. But I didn't know how, and I had no one to talk to. I knew nobody in the comics industry, and I didn't know anyone who knew what to do. So there came a point that I accepted I'll never go in become a newspaper cartoonist. I'll never fulfill my dream to become a newspaper cartoonist. So I have to accept it. Fortunately, at the time, the internet was becoming very big. The World Wide Web was the big keyword at the time. So I opted to publish my comic strips online as a webcomic. Although I have had an archive website since 1997, then at around 2009, the middle of 2009, I was in the middle of my specialization training as a nuclear medicine physician. I dared myself, sige, I'll make a comic strip every day and just put it online and we'll see what happens and see how long I can last. And basically I haven't stopped since. So I wanted people to read my comics. It wasn't enough for me to just put my comic strips online. And then, so I started researching simple Google searches, like how to promote your webcomic or your online comic or your website. That's when I realized, ang dami webcomics online. I thought, I was very naive. I thought I was one of the very few, but there's so many out there. But yun nga, I wanted to be read, I wanted to be noticed. I once had the philosophy na parang build it and they will come, diba? But that's just not the case. It's not going to happen. So, but I was fortunate that the trail had already been blazed. People other webcomic artists around the world would put in their pointers on their blogs or in other places. And the other professional webcomic producers shared their methods online, so we just followed those. So why webcomics? You know, you have a virtually limitless audience. You have instant feedback. You should have. I had a comment section per comic strip. So it was an education for me. I knew what I was doing right or wrong, you know? And I had immediate gratification from my work. It was low-cost production and distribution. You didn't have to invest in making a book per se. And I can be true to myself. I had no editor. So I could write and draw pretty much whatever I wanted. But webcomics is also a community of international artists, so most of us are trying to help each other out. I made a lot of friends abroad and here, not so much yet here in the Philippines, because unfortunately at the time there was not as big a readership in the Philippines, not yet. I also encountered an article online by Byron Wilkins. He is the artist of 1977, the comic. And from on their website, the webcomigalliance.com, he wrote an article called "Writing a Business Plan." And then he mentioned, you know, you have to, if you can think of yourself as a hobbyist when it comes to being a cartoonist, or as a professional. And it was then after reading that article that I decided I'm going to be a professional. I'm going to learn and act and think like one. I don't shy away from saying I do a comic in conversations. And I'm always thinking of how to grow my business. So my comics suddenly became a business now. Now at the time, webcomic revenue came from several sources. You can have it from website advertising or producing your printed books and merchandise. Nowadays, crowdfunding has become very popular through Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other websites. And of course, nowadays you have Patreon, wherein your loyal followers will pledge and support you as you produce your material. Then I suddenly realized that I have to market. You know, so on social media, we have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other methods. I did favors for other artists by producing guest art or guest comics. I would show up as a guest in various podcasts or co-host some of them. I would post my comics on Reddit, Dig, Stumble Upon, and others, website directories, and try to find whatever method of free advertising I could find. This is stuff I just had to pick up online. Even making a comic strip was something I didn't learn in school. So I had to streamline my production process because making a comic strip every day is very hard. So I had pre-printed comic strip templates. I used colored pencils that I could just erase from Photoshop so I wouldn't have to actually erase on the paper. I only colored using flat fills, and I had an easily updatable website. And I purchased the URL callouscomics.com. So I had several challenges in starting this online business per se. I didn't know code. I didn't know how to produce a website. And the website is your storefront, of your comic business. So I used a service called yola.com for a drag and drop website management. Unfortunately, it had less room for creativity, but considering the circumstances I had, that was the way to go. Now, being a webcomic artist means you're a multimedia crew of just one. So you do all the comic production, you do all the marketing. I say a lot that marketing is 80% of the effort, and if you already know how to make comics, it's easy. So that's only 20% of your effort. And I admit, I'm not the most successful webcomic out there. Now, being close to several webcomic artists abroad, I started getting jealous because they were going to comic conventions, getting tables like this in comic conventions and selling their books. I was in the black hole of a medical career. I didn't know anything beyond medicine. So I didn't know of any local comic conventions, and I didn't know any local comic artists. You'll have to forgive me because I was in a black hole. I was in medicine. I had no idea. But upon research, I was able to find that there was actually a very active local comic scene. I got very excited. So I was able to get a table at Metro Komikon in 2010. This was in SM Megaball back then, and that was my very first comic convention. And it was then that I finally met some dear friends now in the comics industry. And before I got to the convention, I had to do research because I've never been to one. I've never been to a Comic-Con. So I had to read the blogs of people who've gone there to see what they want. And there were some indie comic artists that had blogs that I read. They're very informative. So I made my very first book through Microsoft Word, which I no longer recommend today. Then I printed it out in a printer at work, and, but I paid for the ink. And as a comic press, I just used my medical books. Since they're very heavy naman, makapal sila, pwede silang going press for the comics. So that I produced my first book myself. I made 80 copies. And this was me at my very first comic convention in SM Mega Mall. I made 80 copies. I sold them for 120, which back then was a very expensive rate for a comic book, a locally produced independent comic book. But still, people saw my work. They liked it. They bought almost all of it. I saved 2 copies for myself, and they got sold out. Then I produced more books. I didn't want to print them out myself ever again, so I sought printing presses to print these for me. So I produced more books of comic strip compilations. I attended more conventions, notably Komikon, who is one of our hosts today, so thank you very much to Komikon Inc. And as you can see, someone actually cosplayed my characters and joined a cosplay contest as my character. So I was very, very touched and talagang natuwa ako na nakita ko siya. So in comic conventions, what's our goal as comic artists? You know, we want to be visible and reveal ourselves to a new audience, to promote our brand, to sell books and merchandise and sketches, and of course to meet new friends and network and help other creators out. You know, business is business, but you know, in comics, we're all one community, and that includes our readership. You know, we're all in one. We're all in this together. You know, as the song goes. So things were going well. As you can imagine, things were starting to pick up. This was actually, the photo here is actually a Comic-Con in Singapore. It was abroad na. So I thought, should I still, again, pursue my dream of being a newspaper cartoonist? Because I was surprised that there's an audience here in the Philippines for what I make. People like it. I was getting encouragement from colleagues. Some of them are even here today. So yeah, I decided I'll give it a shot. So I submitted around 20 comic strips to the Manila Bulletin. I chose the ones that got the best feedback online. That was another advantage of being a webcomic. And I chose the strips that spoke best of what the series was all about, so that the editor, Sir Ronnie Santiago, could see what I was aiming to do with my comics. I sent it all through email, and I got a reply. And I heard from Sir Ronnie that my comics were getting good feedback, and essentially he was saying that he's accepting my application. And before I knew it, my comics were being published now in the Manila Bulletin. So on August 19, 2012, so that would be many years after the actual series started, I finally got published in the newspaper. I achieved my dream, the things that people told me I would never become. I was able to achieve it. And yeah, I achieved my dream. I'm in a national newspaper. Like almost 500,000 people see my work every day. What do I do from there? After you achieve your dream, what do you do, diba? So I branched out. I formed collaborations with other comic artists, and I decided I wanted to write other things other than my comic strip. So I started another comic called Mouse with the artist here, Pilar Esber. And we put up a website, mousecomic.com, and we do an adventure sci-fi comic together called Mouse, which is an acronym for Multiple Ordnance and Utility Synthetic Entity. So it's a sci-fi adventure kind of comic that's geared to our children naman. And I also started writing another comic called Immortal Wings, and I collaborated with Rod Espinosa. He's an Eisner-nominated comic artist. And this was published by Antarctic Press in the US. So this was a 4-issue miniseries, and well, I felt it was a very good comic. And of course, Rod Espinosa, being an Eisner nominee, he's a very, very good comic artist. Then I produced more Callous comic books. I even had one printed that would that I hope to be distributed to bookstores. And then I also got award nominations, notably just a few months ago with Komikon 2017. I got 4 nominations for Komikon Awards, for Reader's Choice Awards. I believe I had the most nominations. Yeah, so I had the most nominations of any comic artist in any genre in their Reader's Choice Award. But as time went by, I'm getting a bit older. It's becoming harder for me to stay up late at night to produce these comic strips now. So I had to somehow squeeze it in my day as I'm working as a doctor and as other things. I have other quote-unquote racket. And so I had to further streamline my process. So I made a switch to drawing digitally. I now draw on an iPad, and now I no longer have to, thanks to a suggestion from one of my colleagues, Mel Casipit, one of the best comic artists in the country right now. And he's here today, siya yung naka-sombrero. And he convinced me to switch to digital. I didn't have to get the most expensive hardware. My goal was to just be mobile, be able to produce, to draw my comics wherever I am. I didn't have to have a pencil and paper and my set of pens to pencil and ink my comic strips, because it can all be done digital, you know. So this is me in a hospital, hiding while I draw my comics. So what have I learned in this whole process though? One, I have to listen to people who have done it. I can't guess on what I'm going to do next. And fortunately, the Philippine comics community is very, very helpful. They've helped me a whole lot. And I really appreciate the help that the advice they have given me over the years. They blaze the trail for you, and you have to respect and walk that path if you want to go further. Then of course, you have to be true to yourself. My comic is about pretty much my experiences, so I write what I know, and using my own voice. I had to find out who my audience was. Fortunately, through comic conventions, I was able to do that, and I was able to listen to my audience. And of course, your intellectual property is your child. You have to treat it as such, and you have to help your child grow. No? And before you think that I'm no longer practicing as a physician, I still am. I'm still a doctor, and I'm a cartoonist. I have 2 professions. I'm a doctor and a cartoonist. And at least for now, I'm still able to do both. So that was me, talking about me. And if you aspire to become a cartoonist yourself, I can't wait to hear all about you. So thank you very much for your attention, and have a great day, everyone.